I haven't got any feedback regarding my pull request regarding a common Python structure in Ceph.
Um, John Miguel put one or two small comments on there. I'm actually reviewing it now as we speak, so I don't have anything uh, uh, yet to add because I haven't finished reading it. Sorry.
I really expected something like, no, we don't want to do this. No, that doesn't make sense. Just leave it as it is. So what? But that's not what I'm getting. It's more like, hey, this is a good idea, or uh, excellent, or nothing at all. So I'm quite surprised. I was really expecting some resistance.
Yeah, but so far only one guy commented, right? Who's
Yes.
that? Who's that one Miguel
The
Lobo?
one that Jean-Miguel previously worked on the Ceph Ansible orchestrator,
Okay.
and we'll now look more into Rook itself, and quite possibly also the SSH orchestrator.
Well, so we already talked about it. For me, that's a good plan.
Yeah. I mean, in general, as you already mentioned variously, uh, if we have one place to put Python code that is used throughout Ceph and makes Python more of a sort of a first-class citizen, or however you want to put it, then awesome. And we remove duplication and things. Um, I'm generally in favor.
There might be just one question regarding the API generation kind of thing. When will this be re-triggered? There needs to be
Um,
some kind of rule.
I would make a test that if the code doesn't match, the test fails.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I wouldn't automatically generate that file every time. It's more like when something changes in the API, then it actually is a good idea to review it.
And then the guy that changed the API is also responsible for rebuilding the file and then pushing it alongside his pull request.
Um, that's integrated into the Jenkins job. So the Jenkins job will fail, and then you really cannot merge your pull request if the test fails. So
Yeah,
the
sure.
only
That's what I
option
mean.
is to,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I mean. But then that guy that broke the API is then responsible for also submitting a new generated set of API methods, right?
yes.
Okay.
And I think it's it's a good idea. If you change the API, then you really have to make sure that you're doing a good job.
The generated API thing is the API generator and the generated API are both checked in to um, to the source, right? It's not something
Yes.
that happens, yeah,
Yeah.
not something that just happens, every time you build or something.
It just needs to be properly documented.
Yeah.
And the generated API is enormous.
Yeah, I was paging through that and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here. Um,
There is even Ceph tell as a command.
So
So
generating that. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
where was this API before? I mean, is this a new thing, or is this an amalgamation of other pieces that were around the place, or
This is everything the Ceph command line utility supports.
yeah, okay,
And there was no general documentation of what
yeah,
actually is available. That's
okay,
a big pain we had with OpenATIC, that there is just no documentation that covers the whole API.
yeah,
A big pain.
oops.
So if we can generate the API or the Python side of this API, can we then also generate tests for that API?
You can statically type check the API client, but I think that's all what we can do.
Which is probably enough for now.
I think so, yes. It's a big improvement to stuff that was
Yeah.
before.
The mon commands usually always just return strings, right? So it's limited to, or does it return JSON or?
They return a tuple.
Tuple, okay.
An no, std out, and stdr.
Okay, both being strings, because you never specified the return type in the function.
Yes, I did not.
Okay.
But that can be improved.
Sure. No, I mean, it's good. Yeah.
What about this thing here? We've talked about it yesterday.
Hang on. Sorry, just the API thing. Oh, wait, is it what you've just linked to?
No.
No, that's removed. Okay. The API thing. So if somebody imports mon command API and invokes auth add or something like that, then it how does it actually call the thing that it's calling? How does it actually call the function? What am I missing here?
It's using the Radar's Tizen binding.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to pass it to mon command API as cluster. Okay, that needs proper documentation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And then so you import that thing, and like it doesn't end up doing anything weird like shelling out or anything like that. It's calling straight through to whatever pieces are exposed by each component.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
That was also the question that I had yesterday, so because it was not really clear to me where the Radar's object actually comes from. But apparently it comes from the orchestrator that passes it.
It depends. So you can also just write a tool that just imports Radar's, creates a Radar's object, pass it to mon command API, and then you have the mon command API. So it's you can use any Radar's object you have available within the orchestrator as part of the manager module, or imported by yourself, or any other thing that provides you a Radar's object.
Cool. Okay. So to your next thing, the remove OSD. Would anyone except the SSH orchestrator make use of?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think that remove OSD is really a good use case for that Python common package right now. Because I don't like the code. It's clean and it's neat and it looks super but I have a feeling that it might do round trips falling into the orchestrator itself that are not really that great. And it enforces a very low-level API in the orchestrator itself. So I think it's using the wrong API, even though it looks good.
But I mean, most of them are actually mon commands, right?
Orchestrator service instance is the stuff that Tim wrote a while ago.
Sure, yeah, I
Orchestrator
mean, yeah.
OSD Ceph
Yeah.
does not exist yet.
Yeah.
Right.
And the OSD out and purge and whatnot are just straight to the mon, and then the other pieces go out to the orchestrator.
So in theory, you as the orchestrator import that kind of function and call it, and then so that then talks to the API, which is fine, I guess. But then it goes. So your fear is that it goes back to another implementation of orchestrator land by the name of service instance and OSD Zap. By that you mean round trip, right?
Yeah. So I think we are going into a loop here inside of the orchestrator, which is not that great.
Yeah, I see that.
I see what you mean. I mean, it might work fine, but even if it does, it kind of makes my brain hurt a little bit.
Yeah. It hurts to read that code.
But maybe we shouldn't define those high level functions like remove, replace into a library, but maybe we should just offer people the fine grained steps like was the out or was the empty, and then in the orchestrator you can just compose whatever you need because every single implementation is slightly different. And
so the
you would
problem
have
is that the only
duplication kind of thing.
the only orchestrator that really needs a new implementation for OSD remove is the SSH orchestrator.
What about Rook?
Rook will do that in Go. They won't provide a low-level API like Stop OSD or Zap OSD.
Yeah, sure, but that's fine. But they still need the Ceph out and Ceph purge and whatever. That's what they still need. And when they do it in the orchestrator, they can use the Ceph out and they can use the Ceph purge. And then instead of doing a Ceph volume LVM zap or a systemctl stop, they would then use their hook into their Go code saying kill container or whatever.
My gut feeling is they won't do that.
Huh. Bad for them. I mean, I don't know.
Because it would contradict what the Rook people were doing in the past. Like providing a full-fledged orchestrator in the Rook repository. And when they would start using the orchestrator for removing OSD, that would be awkward. They would call into the orchestrator and then back into Rook. And no, I really don't think they will do that. But there is a recent development that's called a CMD reporter. It's this one here. That's a way to do imperative code into Rook. And it might actually be usable for remove OSD and could provide these low-level things like OSD Ceph or service instance. But I don't know.
Huh. Well, yeah, I don't know either. There's no clue about the whole Rook thing.
Yeah, and in the orchestrator, we always have to think about all orchestrators out there. That's
Right.
slowing us down if we are looking into the API itself. If we are only looking into one orchestrator, it starts to get more easy. But right now,
Sure.
it's we are looking at the API level, and that level it's getting complicated.
Yeah, so I guess we have to somehow make some sort of a survey asking people what is the common ground that we have. And in my opinion, it's all the Ceph commands and all the Ceph utility commands like OSD handling and stuff like this, and figuring out if an OSD is empty and all that kind of stuff that everybody will implement at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they will, and it's duplicated code because every orchestrator will do exactly the same, implemented in completely different frameworks.
Yeah.
And I was actually wrong. We have not 4 orchestrator. We actually have 5 orchestrators because Ceph deploy is still not dead yet and is maintained.
Yeah, but is it doing something with the orchestrator?
Nothing.
Okay.
But in itself, it's an orchestrator because it provides stuff other orchestrators are doing too.
Yeah, and people are presumably still using this thing to deploy clusters.
Yeah, and that needs to stop.
So could you, I know this is maybe not really the scope of this meeting, but could you tell me a bit more about how the whole Rook thing, so let's say how Rook would remove an OSD. How exactly does it work right now? Like from a technical standpoint.
From an API standpoint, there is a description of how the storage looks like in the Kubernetes API. There is a Kubernetes API object that's called Ceph cluster, and which is a YAML file, and the YAML file contains a storage element, and in that storage element there is a description of which devices are used by Rook.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to your drive groups because they all need to solve the same problem. So it was something that existed before drive groups. But it's not as sophisticated. Right? It's hard-coded, not as sophisticated, and limited, and has a it has a bad feeling attached to it because if you want to remove an OSD, then you're just removing the device from that big Ceph cluster customary resource object in the Kubernetes API. And then Rook compares the previous Ceph cluster object to the current Ceph cluster object, discovers that, oh, that OSD is missing, or that device is missing from that object. And then it starts to basically remove the OSD container.
Mm-hmm. And then that file, how is that listed? So is it saying device A is attached to OSD ID, or is attached to a host, or is attached to a pod or a specific container?
It's very generic. It does not contain OSD IDs. It just contains list of drives.
Okay. Not pointed to any sort of host, or is it per host? One file?
Per host. So it's
Okay.
it's a list of hosts, and the sub-object is a list of devices.
Got
kind
it.
of.
Okay.
Yeah, and from a technical point, they're using the Kubernetes API, a Kubernetes API watcher that will just notify the Rook orchestrator that something was, that the Ceph cluster object was modified.
Yeah. I can tell you already that this will change in the future because we did this exact same thing in DFC and it turned out to be very, very bad. Like from a management standpoint.
Yes. And every group will learn the exact same lessons.
Yeah.
And that's so
Which
painful
sucks. Yeah.
from an upstream perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So Kubernetes computes the difference between the old file and the new file, right? And
Yes.
then it sees, okay, there's this one file, there's this one device missing, and then it computes, where this what is the container that was attached to that device, and then it kills the OSD.
Yeah. And right now I'm trying to force the Rook guys to actually look into drive groups.
Okay. But only killing the container is doing nothing on the Ceph side.
It will also remove the OSD from Ceph.
Okay, so they have something like a hook that once the container is removed, there is also like an action or something that triggers this whole Ceph remove, Ceph purge, Ceph out, wait until data is gone and stuff like that.
I don't know if they actually do wait until the data is gone. I don't know.
That's okay, but that's in detail. I mean,
that's the detail, yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, removing that OSD specification is like a delete request to the Kubernetes API. That's a function call like any other function call too, like OSD out or OSD purge.
But I mean, so they are going from a different side to the problem, right? So they're basically saying Kubernetes is the source of truth, and I want to delete that kind of disk. But we're trying to go from the other side and saying Ceph is the source of truth, and we want to delete that OSD. And Ceph will figure out which device is attached to that OSD, and then triggering the action on the host side, which is probably the better idea. And that could also be done by Rook, because Ceph knows that a disk is attached to an OSD, and then you say remove, then you do the Ceph things because you have to do them first anyways. And then you trigger orchestrator side things that say rook delete this line in that file and then retrigger the whole Kubernetes build a delta thing and remove the pod container, whatever. We're going from the Ceph side, they're going from the Kubernetes side.
Yeah, and in the Kubernetes world, being in the whole Kubernetes ecosystem, Kubernetes is always kind of the source of truth.
Yeah, but it can still be.
Yeah, that's why I'm pushing the drive groups into the Rook project a bit.
Yeah.
So that the drive groups are then stored within Kubernetes, so that Kubernetes is still the source of truth, but we have drive groups that match what the other part of the Ceph ecosystem is using.
Yeah.
Even though that might mean that we have to extend the drive groups with stuff, especially for Kubernetes, but
Which is not a problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem. It's just something optional that does not need to be implemented.
Okay.
So I'm not yet clear how. I think remove OSD is already implemented, but replace OSD is not.
Yeah, and that's where problems come really into play, because handling files, especially currently, as it seems, they're only standalone OSDs. But when you have dedicated write-ahead logs and databases, and then caching devices, and not really persistent names, and then if you want to start replacing within a YAML file certain OSDs, but not the pieces of the write-ahead log from other OSDs, then it starts to get really messy. And that's why we actually moved to not specifying paths, but rather than describing the attributes of a drive.
Yeah.
Which makes it very much easier.
Yeah. We just have to make sure that it's easy consumable.
Yeah.
Like providing a command that does everything for you that can be called by Rook. Kind of similar to the Ceph volume or in Ceph volume itself. Something that's easily consumable. Because otherwise I don't think that the Rook community will actually make use of it.
Yeah, but I mean, so currently they specify drives, right? So, and they punch it in the file themselves, or is it something that Rook does for you? Discover the disks and then put this into some sort of inventory. Is that something that Rook does? Or
that's implemented in Rook itself, yeah.
Okay. So, but then if you think one step further, and you don't want certain drives to be used, then you would have to go in that file and adapt it and prevent Rook from discovering them again, and that kind of thing. And then it gets complicated again. So that's an argument for doing it right in the first place.
Yes. And there is a valid argument that Rook might not be as enterprise ready as we would like to have it.
Yeah. I mean, I can only tell you from the deep sea experience. So when we started this thing, everything was very easy. We only did the most basic things, but when things started to get a bit more sophisticated and then a bit more complicated, suddenly our approaches were not the best anymore, and then we had to change. And yeah, because with you can do so many complex things with Ceph that you only have to do when people actually request them. And currently, I think in Rook nobody's requesting really anything specific or special. But once that happens, I think the certain approaches will not be the best anymore. And yeah, maybe we should do the right thing and start with things that prove themselves to be good, or well, they haven't proven themselves, but yeah.
Changing minds is hard.
It is. It is.
We can encourage people to use drive groups and use a combined effort. And providing a good example is a good way. Like showing that DeepC is using drive groups and DeepC is successful in using drive groups is a
we don't know yet.
good argument. But it's well thought out, but durchdacht.
Yeah.
And I think it in thought through, yeah. And it evolved from previous experience. So
right.
Yeah, and if we if we point out that drive groups are sort of a they're a way of doing Ceph volume stuff, if I can state that poorly. And Ceph volume is the way that Ceph, creates and manages OSDs. Then, like, it's a natural thing to present to people, right? If you want to deploy Ceph, if you want to deploy OSDs, you have to use Ceph volume underneath, and drive groups are a thing that matches this well. Then, just use this specification, please.
Yeah.
Drive groups are only 50% of the truth. The other 50% is actually Ceph volume's batch command.
If we add drive groups to Ceph volume, that would solve many problems.
Well, I would just shift logic away, but
yeah.
But
it would shift logic into Ceph volume itself, which is a good thing, but painfully to get much.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
That's a separate problem.
It is.
But if we put drive groups into Ceph volume, then there would be no need to actually do Ceph volume batch commands by itself. All you have to deal with is drive groups. And drive groups is a thing that can also be integrated into the dashboard. So if we have that, we would have a complete chain of integrating the dashboard into the orchestrator, into passing it through the actual orchestrator implementation to Ceph volume on the host itself, which would be really awesome.
That would be great. I mean, because drive groups can be, they're a very abstract thing, but they can be visualized pretty easily.
Yeah.
So by just turning one knob, you can visualize what you actually changed in your cluster OSD topology, and that can be leveraged in the dashboard pretty neatly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely makes sense to put it somewhere up the stack. If it's Ceph volume, or if it's Ceph itself, or if it's orchestrator, I don't really care. But probably Ceph volume makes sense because that's actually because you actually generate Ceph volume commands out of it. The only thing that bugs me is if in the near future or in the far future somebody decides that Ceph volume is not something for them, they have to use Ceph volume if they want to use drive groups, or they have to re-implement something. So that's the only thing that, with future in mind, that's maybe not a good idea. Because, we all know that tools get replaced if you look at Ceph disk, and Ceph volume will be definitely not the end all be all.
But I think drive groups will hopefully stay longer in the ecosystem.
Oh, I hope so. That would be great. But what I mean is, if we only put them in Ceph volume and Ceph volume will go away, then we have to implement it again somewhere else.
Yeah, they have to be in the orchestrator itself and everywhere, and also in Ceph volume.
If my guess, based on just phase of the moon and gut feeling and that sort of thing, if Ceph volume goes away, it'll be at least 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah.
Just based on the rate of change of other pieces we've seen. So it's not a. I don't think we have any immediate doom there. But you're right to raise the point.
Yeah.
And maybe drive groups are a success, and a future replacement for Ceph volume will just implement drive groups in a more native way.
Yeah, but I mean, if we just implement them one stack above, you will always have those drive groups, and they will just then either generate a set of Ceph volume commands or a set of Ceph future tool whatever commands, and we have never re-implement. But I'm fine with either way. I just wanted to raise the point.
From a perspective of someone trying to get Rook to use drive groups, having them natively implemented in Ceph volume would be a big selling argument.
Okay. Yep. I can take a look at that. Implementing them in Ceph volume, because I did the implementation for DeepC anyways, and didn't take too long.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. Then I will continue with my Ceph common pull request, gathering some more feedback, extending it a bit more, maybe adding some tests.
It's only got John Miguel and myself as reviewers at the moment. So, oh wait, Patrick Donnelly also said something.
Patrick, he said something?
Hang on, it's shown up in.
Yeah, he just added the common label.
Oh, okay. No, sorry,
and
I was
the first ever Python pull request with a common label.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it would be nice to get some more. It would be nice to get opinions from more people other than myself and JM. Because, like, if we're trying to do if the goal is to unify and make sort of a common core of Python pieces out of a whole bunch of disparate pieces, then that's a conceptually large change for the code base, right?
Yeah. And I would like to have people like Alfredo on board and Sage on board and Jason Dillerman on board.
Yeah, exactly.
and then I think it's good to go.
Yep.
That's all I have for today.
Yeah, I don't have any particular updates myself. Well, hey, it's us. We had Hack Week last week, and I've got upgrade stuff to do, and so hopefully I'll have something more interesting to say next week.
Okay.
I'm just listening and learning.
Awesome.
Yeah, indeed.
The only thing I had to add is that I definitely think that the perspective for Rook is that Kubernetes is the single source of truth when it comes to basically anything, because that's kind of the selling point of Kubernetes at all. It's my impression.
Yeah. So having Ceph itself be the source of truth in Rook will be hard to get into Rook. So it's easier to sell if Kubernetes itself is the source of truth. And if we get drive groups into Rook, into Kubernetes, that would be awesome.
It seems that I have to learn a lot about Rook and Kubernetes and their general approach.
You and me both.
Yeah. Because that's no point. I just can't argue with these people if I have no clue what they're doing.
There is a Rook community meeting every 2 weeks. What's the name for every 2 weeks?
Fortnightly.
Yeah, fortnightly. Yeah.
But bi-weekly probably works too. Anyway, whatever.
I could try to get you guys invited, or you can just join it if you want to.
Sure.
Just to learn things. Nothing for you, Tim, but Joshua and Christopher.
Oh well, yeah. I just looked up bi-weekly. It's bi-weekly is ambiguous because it means either every 2 weeks or twice a week, depending on who you ask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great language.
All precise.
Oh yeah, I'm very sorry for English. It's all shit.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Then the next upstream meeting is on Monday then.
Hey guys.
Bye.
Thanks all.